Hey guys, my name is Necro, and it's Tech Time. I wanted to take a moment today to talk about a side of technology that almost every gamer talks about, but I don't think a lot of people actually understand, and that's clock speeds. Almost every gamer who has a PC judges how effective their processor is based off of the clock speed. I mean, on the surface, that's fair. That's what the manufacturers rate, that's what game designers say the requirements are based off of. So if that's what everybody's using, how can that not be accurate? Well, I've got three letters for you. IPC. And no, this has nothing to do with Violent J. IPC is the instructions per cycle, or how many calculations the processor can do in a given clock cycle. What exactly is a clock cycle? The answer that a lot of people would give you is just how fast the processor is, or clock speed. For example, the i7-7700K, out of the box, no overclocking, has a speed of 4.2 gigahertz, with a boost to 4.5 gigahertz, meaning without overclocking its fastest speed is about 4.5 billion clock cycles each second. But that doesn't actually tell us what the clock cycle is. Inside of every processor there are thousands of nanoscale wires that are each part of a system that allows your processor to send commands and pull information from the rest of your system, primarily from the system RAM. There's one very important wire inside of each processor that doesn't do anything with the rest of the machine, though. That is the clock. Every time a pulse of electricity goes through the clock inside of the processor, the rest of the processor is able to execute those commands, sending and receiving that information from the rest of your computer. How many times per second that happens, that is your clock speed. Based on the architecture and the lithography, you can actually fit a lot more pieces into your processor to perform these calculations, thus increasing the amount of calculations that can happen every time the clock sends the go signal. It is for this reason that you can have two CPUs that have the same core count and the same clock speed, but that perform very differently. Let's look at, for example, the Core 2 Quad Q9400, an absolute beast of a processor when it came out. Out of the box, the clock speed was 2.66 gigahertz, and if you had adequate cooling, could easily make it to a stable 3.5 gigahertz. Compare that to this year's i5-7400, which is also a quad core at 3.5 gigahertz though, and the difference in performance is astounding. In this comparison, the Q9400 would be easily trounced by this i5-7400 2 or 3 times over, despite appearing exactly the same on paper. And as a side note, that 7400 is also going to have significantly lower power draw, so less heat output as well, requiring less cooling. Now, I know a lot of you are going to already be pointing out the fact that I'm comparing two processors that are 10 years apart, but it's not limited only to processors with that sort of age difference. Let's look at the AMD FX 8350 and an Intel processor that came out around the same time. That would be the i7-2600K. This gives us a much more relative and a much more telling comparison when factoring in IPC. The FX 8350 is an 8-core processor, although they're stacking 2 processors per module, which is a more technical discussion that we're not getting into right now. And its clock speed out of the box is 4 gigahertz. The 2600K is a quad-core processor with a speed of 3.4 gigahertz. So on paper, that 8350 is much more powerful, twice the processing cores, and each one is faster. If we want to measure actual performance though, and not just clock speed, that's done in flops, floating point operations per second. The FX 8350 has a speed of about 73 gigaflops, or 73 billion individual calculations per second. That i7-2600K, keep in mind half the cores and a lower speed, has a speed of 83 gigaflops, so a difference of 10 billion calculations per second. That much inferior on paper i7 is about 14% faster in practical use. That is IPC. Intel, which I'm using mostly because they've dominated the processor market for the past decade or so, has seen an average increase in IPC of about 10% year after year. At the same time, they've become much more efficient, so they've had better thermals, meaning also higher clock speeds. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes than most people think when it comes to the performance of their computers. There's a lot more to consider than just stat chasing. Just because you can push your processor to 5 gigahertz does not mean it's necessarily going to perform any better than somebody else's processor. However, that's a good thing. That means that budget CPUs are able to keep up with or exceed the performance of the enthusiast level CPUs of yesteryear. Now this was something that I touched on, was actually sort of the main focus in the background of my video from last week, where I built that budget computer using the Pentium G4620, and it was able to play every single AAA title that I threw at it at ultra settings and be completely smooth and playable. And as this technology advances, it's only going to get better. So if you're a PC gamer, or you're looking to get into PC gaming, keep in mind what you're looking at and what you're spending your money on. You can save money one of two ways, by either buying the new budget components or buying used enthusiast components. But you need to be smart about what you're buying. If you're not familiar with the technology, or you have any doubts, the safe bet is just to buy the newer technology. That way, even if it does start to have lackluster performance in a couple years, you're already on a newer motherboard, newer chipset, so it's much easier to upgrade and much cheaper to upgrade later on. I hope you guys found this more technical discussion entertaining, or at the very least informative. I know this is, admittedly, a gross oversimplification of some things. I did kind of gloss over some topics, but I figured those who wanted a deeper and grittier understanding of CPU technology either already have that information or can get it elsewhere. My goal here is to share a new concept with those either new to the scene or who aren't as familiar with the technical side of it, so that they can make a better, more informed decision for themselves. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, thumbs up. If not, thumbs down. Subscribe if you'd like to see more, and as always, suggestions are welcome, so leave a comment below if there's something in particular you'd like to see, and I will catch you guys next time.